A student messaged me last week panicking about the CompTIA A Core 2221,102 exam, and her question was so common I figured I'd just answer it for everybody. She was doing all the reading, but when it came to the actual troubleshooting simulations, she felt like she was guessing. Today we're going to dissect the specific strategic errors that keep people from that passing score, from misjudging administrative rights to flubbing the malware remediation steps. We'll look at the command line, security protocols, and operational procedures through a different lens. Let's get started. Observe that many candidates possess the technical knowledge but fail because they don't understand the context the exam requires. It's not just about what a tool does, it's about when to use it and why the alternatives are incorrect. Let's begin with how we handle the operating system itself. Now here's the thing about Windows and Linux, they're built on hierarchies that most people simply ignore until something breaks. The first mistake is underestimating the nuance of permissions. Okay? Think of UAC like a security guard at a high clearance facility who stops you even if he knows you, just to verify your ID badge. The mistake is assuming UAC is just an annoyance to be disabled rather than a critical security boundary. Candidates often forget that even an administrator runs most tasks with standard privileges until that prompt appears. Why is the wrong answer tempting? Because in the real world, we often disable it for convenience, but on the exam, that's a security violation. What I see students do is confuse administrator accounts with running as administrator. They aren't the same thing. Always look for the shield icon in the exam simulations. Consider a gated community. The share permission is the gate guard, but the NTFS permission is the lock on your actual front door. If the guard lets you in but you don't have the house key, you aren't getting into the kitchen. Candidates frequently fail to realize that the most restrictive permission wins when these two overlap. The thing nobody tells you is that local access bypasses share permissions entirely, which is a classic exam trap, okay? If you're sitting at the machine, the gate guard doesn't matter. You must calculate both to find the effective permission. Imagine a library book where you can either read it, write in the margins, or use the instructions inside to build something. In Linux, we represent this with numbers, 4 for read, 2 for write, and 1 for execute. The mistake is trying to memorize every combination instead of just doing the math. If you see chmod 755s, just think 7 is everything, 5 is read and execute. Why do students miss this? They flip the order of user, group, and others. Remember the hierarchy, you, your friends, then the rest of the world. It's a logical progression, isn't it? Right? Quick reset. Most people fear the black box of the CLI, but the exam loves it. What people do wrong here is treating Windows and Linux commands as interchangeable. Think of these like the About page on your phone, but for your network card. In Windows, we use IPConfigs, think P for PC. In Linux and older Mac OS, it's IFConfigs, think 4. Well, interface. The mistake is forgetting that IPConfig role is the only way to see the MAC address and DNS in Windows. Students often pick the basic command and wonder why they can't find the physical address. Actually, let me back up. Modern Linux uses the IP address command, but for the A+, IFConfigs is still the classic go-to you'll likely see. Don't get tripped up by the extra / in Windows syntax. If your computer is a car that won't start, the bootrec command is like checking the ignition in the battery. Candidates often confuse bootrec or fixmbrs with bootrec or fixboot. The MBR is the very first thing the computer looks at, the master's record. If that's broken, nothing else happens. The thing is, students often try to reinstall the whole OS when a simple command line fix would have worked. Observe that the master comes before the boot. It's a sequence of events, not a random choice. Right, quick note, imagine your computer is a filing cabinet. FC checks if the files themselves are corrupted, while CHKDSK checks if the actual metal drawers are dented or broken. The mistake is using CHKDSK when an application is crashing. If the app is the problem, check the system files with SFC. If the whole drive is making clicking noises or disappearing, that's a check disk situation. I see people run these interchangeably, but the exam wants the specific tool for the specific layer of failure. Does that make sense? Okay, buckle up. This next bit catches even experienced candidates because it requires a very specific order of operations. Here's why people fail the security section. They skip steps. Let me put it another way. Think of this like treating a contagious virus in a hospital. You don't just give the patient medicine, you isolate them first so they don't infect others. The mistake is jumping straight to removes before identify and quarantine. If you don't disconnect the network cable or disable the Wi-Fi, which is step 2, quarantine, the malware might keep spreading while you're trying to kill it. This is the hardest part of the exam for many. What I see students do is forget to disable system restore. If you don't do that, the malware just hides in a restore point and comes back to life like a movie villain. It's a strict sequence for a reason. Right, quick note. Consider a person walking into an office building holding 2 large boxes of pizza. He'd probably hold the door open for them, right? That's tailgating, and it's the most common physical security hole. The mistake on the exam is confusing tailgating with piggybacking. Let's weigh them. In tailgating, the person follows you without your knowledge. In piggybacking, you know they're there and you let them in anyway, perhaps out of kindness. The exam will describe a scenario. Did the employee know the person was behind them? That one detail changes the answer. Stay sharp on those nuances. Imagine a fisherman throwing a massive net into the ocean versus a hunter with a specialized harpoon aiming at one specific shark. Phishing is the net. It's generic, sent to millions, hoping one person clicks. Spearphishing is the harpoon. It uses your name, your job title, and maybe even mentions your boss. The mistake is thinking all fake emails are just phishing. If the scenario mentions a specific target like the CFO or the accounting department, the exam is looking for spearphishing or whaling. Context is everything here. Stay with me here. This section isn't about technology, it's about how we act as professionals. What people do wrong is ignoring the boring paperwork and safety rules. Think of change management like a city's building permit process. You can't just knock down a wall in your house because it might support the neighbor's roof. In IT, we must document the purpose, the risk, and, most importantly, the backup plan. The mistake candidates make is assuming they can just fix things on the fly. On the exam, if you haven't consulted the change advisory board for a major server move, you're wrong. The thing nobody tells you is that the backup plan is often the correct answer for what is missing from this proposal. Always have an exit strategy. Okay? Imagine cleaning up a spilled chemical in a kitchen. You don't just use a paper towel, you look at the warning label. For IT, that's the SDS, the safety data sheet. The mistake is guessing how to dispose of a battery or a monitor. If the exam asks how to handle a chemical or a hazardous component, the answer is always to consult the SDS. Also, observe the difference between a Class C fire extinguisher and others. You don't put water on an electrical fire unless you want a very painful surprise. Use CO2 or halon. Right, quick note, consider a doctor with a terrible bedside manner. Even if they're a genius, you won't trust them. As a tech, your communication is your bedside manner. The mistake is using technical jargon with a customer who doesn't know what a DHCP lease is. What I see students do is try to fix the customer instead of the problem. If a customer is angry, don't argue. Listen, clarify, and then solve. The exam tests this soft skill heavily. Avoiding jargon and maintaining a positive attitude are often the most correct answers in a scenario. Okay, final stretch. Let's look at the devices that leave the office. Here's why that fails on exam day. We treat mobile devices like they're just small desktops. Right, quick note. Think of remote desktop as taking the keys to someone's car and driving it while they're at home. Remote assistance is like sitting in the passenger seat while they drive, helping them steer. The mistake is picking RDP when the user needs to see what you're doing. RDP locks the local screen. If the goal is training or collaboration, you need remote assistance or a third-party tool. If the goal is server maintenance at 2 a.m., RDP is your friend. One locks out, one invites in. Okay? Imagine a company giving you a locker. MDM is the company owning the whole locker and everything in it. MAM is the company just putting a small locked box inside your personal locker. Mobile device management controls the hardware. It can wipe the whole phone. Mobile application management only controls the corporate apps like Outlook. The mistake is picking a full wipe MDM for a bring your own device or BYOD scenario where the user only lost their corporate email password. Respect the boundary between personal and private. So, watch this. A script is just a recipe. If you follow the steps, you get the same cake every time. For the A+, you don't need to be a coder, but you must recognize the ingredients. .bat is Windows Bash. .ps1 is PowerShell, look for that one, and .ss is a Linux shell script. The mistake is overthinking the logic. Usually, the exam just wants you to identify which environment the script runs in. If you see a lot of $signs and complex commands, it's probably PowerShell. If it looks like old DOS commands, it's Batch. Don't let the code intimidate you. We covered a lot of ground today, from the nuances of NTFS permissions to the strict 7-step dance of malware removal. Remember, the Core 2 exam isn't just testing your memory, it's testing your judgment as a technician. You have to know the why behind the what. If you can identify the specific mistake in a scenario, whether it's a security lapse or a procedural error, you're already halfway to a passing score. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this: passive reading doesn't pass the CompTIA A Core 2221102 exam. Active practice does. Go grab a free practice test on certv.com and prove to yourself you've got it. Subscribe for more. You've done the hard work of learning, now it's time to refine that knowledge into a certification.